12 alien students had never seen a human eat a sandwich before. They watched David Webb take a large bite of processed meat and vegetables packed between two slices of bread, and several of them made small sounds of discomfort. The human chewed calmly, looking out the shuttle window at the orange clouds below, completely unaware that he was the most interesting thing on the ship. Prill, a small fox-like creature with lavender fur and ears too big for her head, leaned toward her classmate. "He is eating dead animal flesh," she whispered. "Right in front of us." Her classmate Incy, who looked like a floating jellyfish made of pale blue light, pulsed nervously. "I read that humans must consume other creatures to survive. They cannot make their own food from sunlight like proper beings." David finished his sandwich and wiped his hands on his pants. He was 28 years old, with brown hair and a plain face. Nothing about him looked dangerous. He wore the same student uniform as everyone else. Yet every alien in the shuttle kept their distance from his seat. Professor Mulvaney, a tall being with silver blue scales and 4 arms, stood at the front of the shuttle. "Students, we will land on Verdant 7 in 10 minutes. This moon has been fully surveyed. The northern region where we will study is completely safe. There are no dangerous predators in our research area." A large student named Torgun laughed loudly. He looked like a rhinoceros that learned to walk on 2 legs, with 4 eyes and gray skin as thick as armor. "Safe enough even for the soft human." Then, he said, looking at David. Some students laughed nervously. David did not react. He simply pulled out his datapad and continued reading about the local animals they would study. Prill felt bad for the human. She had heard terrible stories about Earth, the planet where humans came from. A world where the rain could be poison, where the ground shook and split open, where giant predators hunted anything that moved. She could not imagine growing up in such a horrible place. She gathered her courage and walked over to sit near David. "Hello, I am Prill. We have not spoken before." David looked up from his datapad and smiled. His teeth were flat, not pointed like a hunter's teeth should be. "David Webb. Nice to meet you, Prill. Are you excited about the field trip?" "Yes. I want to study the singing insects." She paused. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Prill's ears folded back with embarrassment. "Something more scary. The stories about humans are very frightening." David laughed softly. "I'm just a wildlife biologist. I spent most of my life watching animals in forests and mountains. Nothing scary about that. On Earth. You watch the animals on Earth." Prill's eyes went wide. "The death world." "We don't call it that," David said. "We just call it home." The shuttle began its descent. Through the windows, they could see a vast jungle spreading across the moon's surface. The trees were purple and gold, reaching toward the sky like giant hands. 2 suns painted everything in warm light. Professor Mulvaney assigned research groups. She placed David with Prill, Incy, and 2 other nervous students. "The human seems calm," she told her assistant quietly. "He might help keep the timid ones focused." Torgun led his own group toward the shuttle door. "Try to keep up, soft ones," he called back. "Some of us are not afraid of a little jungle." The door opened. Warm air rushed in, carrying strange smells. The students hurried out into the clearing, excited to begin their research. Alien birds sang in the distance. Small creatures with too many legs scattered through the undergrowth. David was the last to leave the shuttle. He stood on the ramp and breathed deeply. His smile faded. He looked at the tree line, then at the ground, then at the trees again. Prill noticed his change. "Is something wrong?" David did not answer right away. He was looking at scratch marks on a nearby tree. They were very high up, higher than any of the animals in the research files. He looked at the grass. Something heavy had pressed it down recently. The birds had stopped singing on the western side of the clearing. He had grown up in Montana, tracking wolves and bears through mountain forests. He knew what a hunting ground looked like. He knew what silence meant in wild places. This place felt wrong. "Nothing," David said finally. He stepped off the ramp and joined the group. Just getting used to the air. He would mention his concerns to the professor later. There was no need to frighten anyone over what might be nothing. Still, as they walked into the purple jungle, David kept looking over his shoulder at the shadows between the trees. Something was watching them. He was sure of it. The jungle floor glowed with soft blue light from plants that had never seen Earth's sun. Prill walked beside David, her large ears turning in every direction to catch new sounds. For the first time since leaving her homeworld, she was not afraid of the human next to her. "What is that sound?" she asked, pointing toward a cluster of purple bushes. David listened. "Some kind of insect, I think. Similar to crickets back home." He crouched down to look more closely. They rubbed their legs together to make music, probably looking for mates. Ainsi floated nearby, her jellyfish body pulsing with soft colors. "You know this from studying Earth creatures?" "I grew up surrounded by wild animals," David said. "My grandfather taught me to track deer when I was 6 years old. By the time I was 12, I could identify every animal in our valley by its footprints." Prill shivered. "Were you not frightened? Earth has so many things that can kill you." David stood up and smiled. "Everything can kill you if you're careless. The trick is to pay attention and respect the animals around you. Most creatures don't want to fight. They just want to eat and survive, same as us." They walked deeper into the jungle. The two suns moved across the sky, casting long shadows through the canopy. David stopped often to examine things the others walked past. A broken branch, pressed grass, a patch of disturbed soil. Professor Mulvaney checked on each group through their communicators. "How's your progress?" "Group 4. "Good," David answered. "We've documented several insect species. The ecosystem here is very rich." He paused. "Professor, I noticed some unusual markings on the trees near the landing site. Have there been any large predators reported in this region?" "Absolutely not," Mulvaney replied. "The surveys were completed 3 months ago. All dangerous fauna are confined to the southern hemisphere. You have nothing to worry about." David did not argue, but he did not stop watching the shadows either. Meanwhile, Torgun led his group toward a rocky hillside. His 4 eyes scanned the terrain with boredom. This field trip was too easy. There was no challenge here, nothing to prove his strength. "Look," one of his groupmates said, pointing at a dark opening in the rocks. "A cave." Torgun's ears perked up. "We should explore it. There might be interesting specimens inside." "We don't have permission to enter cave systems," another student said nervously. "Then we will get permission by discovering something valuable." Torgun pushed past them and walked into the darkness. After a moment, the others followed, too afraid to be left alone. The cave was deeper than they expected. Their lights cast moving shadows on walls covered with strange crystals. The air smelled old and dry. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. Torgun stopped suddenly. His light had fallen on something lying on the ground. It was a scale bigger than his hand, dark green with edges like broken glass. "What kind of creature leaves scales this size?" someone whispered. Then they found the bones. They were scattered across a wide area of the cave floor. Some were small, from creatures the size of dogs. Others were massive, from animals as big as their shuttle. All of them had been cracked open, the marrow inside long gone. "We should leave," a student said, her voice shaking. "We should leave right now." Torgun tried to sound brave, but his legs were trembling. "Yes, we will report this to the professor." Then they heard it, a sound from deeper in the cave. Something scraping against stone. Something heavy, breathing slowly in the darkness where their lights could not reach. Torgun ran. They all ran. But the cave had many passages, and in their panic, they chose the wrong one. Back in the jungle, David lifted his head. His hand shot up, signaling the others to stop. "What is it?" Prill asked. "I don't know. Something changed." He looked around. The birds had gone silent. The insects had stopped their songs. The jungle was holding its breath. Every communicator crackled at the same time. Torgun's voice burst through, high and terrified. Nothing like the confident bully from the shuttle. "Help us. Something is here. Something big. It found us in the caves, and we can't find a way out. It's hunting us. Please, someone help." The message dissolved into screaming. Then static. Then silence. Prill grabbed David's arm. Her whole body was shaking. Ainsi had turned almost white with fear. David looked toward the rocky hills in the distance. His face had changed. The gentle biologist was gone. Something older had taken his place, something written into human blood through millions of years of survival. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. All of you, stay close and stay quiet. In the distance, something roared. The sound shook the trees and sent birds exploding from the canopy in every direction. The hunt had begun. Panic spread faster than fire. Students who had been calmly studying insects moments ago now ran blindly through the jungle, screaming and crashing through bushes. Professor Milvani shouted into her communicator, trying to organize everyone, but fear had taken control. David grabbed Prill before she could run. Stop. Moving makes noise. Noise draws predators. But Torgun and the others, we can't help them if we're dead. David looked at the small group still near him. Prill, Ainsi, and 3 other students who had frozen in terror instead of running. Everyone, look at me. Breathe slowly. We stay together. Another roar shook the jungle. Closer this time. Trees cracked and fell somewhere to the north. Something very large was moving through the forest, and it was not being careful about the noise it made. Then Torgun burst from the bushes. His thick gray skin was covered in blood. 2 other students stumbled behind him, holding wounds on their arms and sides. They had escaped the caves, but they had not escaped unharmed. It's coming, Torgun shouted. His 4 eyes were wild with terror. Run. Everyone run. He tried to keep running, but his injured leg gave out. He crashed to the ground and lay there, whimpering like a child. The jungle went silent. Even the wind stopped blowing. Every living creature knew what that silence meant. The predators stepped out of the shadows. Prill had never seen anything so terrifying. It stood 4 meters tall at the shoulder, its body a nightmare mix of insect and cat. 6 powerful legs ended in claws that could tear through metal. Its segmented body was covered in armored plates the color of dried blood. Its head was the worst part, with a dozen eyes scattered across its skull and mandibles that looked strong enough to crush stone. That it was a Vorax. An Apex 7 predator, the most dangerous classification in galactic records. No one had ever survived an encounter with one. Professor Milvani stood frozen, her datapad hanging from nerveless fingers. That's impossible, she whispered. They don't live in the northern regions. The surveys said the Vorax did not care about surveys. It stepped into the clearing, its many eyes moving separately to watch every student at once. It was in no hurry. Prey never escaped. Prey always died. Some students tried to run. The Vorax moved faster than anything that Psi should be able to move, cutting off their escape routes with terrifying ease. It was hurting them, pushing them together into a tighter group, making the hunt more efficient. Ainsi had turned completely white. Her body flickered with colors that meant pure terror in her species. Prill had pressed herself against David's side, shaking so hard she could barely stand. The Vorax focused on Torgun. He was wounded, bleeding, weak. The easiest prey. It began walking toward him, each step shaking the ground. Then David moved that he walked forward, away from the group, placing himself between the Vorax and the fallen Torgun. His steps were calm and steady. His breathing was slow. His eyes never left the creature. What are you doing? Professor Milvani screamed. Get back here. You can't fight that thing. David did not answer. He stopped 5 meters from the Vorax and planted his feet. He raised his arms slightly, making his body appear larger. He lifted his chin and looked directly into the creature's primary eyes. The Vorax stopped. For 1 million years, this species had been the ultimate hunter. Every creature in the galaxy ran from them. Every species screamed and fled and died. That was the natural order. That was how things worked. But this small, soft creature was not running. The Vorax tilted its massive head. Its mandibles clicked together slowly. It took 1 step forward, testing, waiting for the prey to break and run. David did not move. The alien students watched in stunned silence. Prillet stopped breathing. Professor Mulvaney had never seen anything like this in 40 years of teaching. The human stood there like a statue, facing a monster that could kill him in half a second, and he did not run. The Vorax made a sound deep in its chest. Not a roar. Something else. Something that might have been confusion. It took another step forward. David took a step forward too. The creature stopped again. Its many eyes blinked in a wave across its skull. In all its hunting memories, passed down through countless generations, it had never seen prey do this. Prey did not walk toward death. Prey did not meet its gaze, unless it was not prey at all, unless it was something else entirely. The Vorax and the humans stared at each other across 5 meters of blood-stained grass. Neither moved. Neither looked away. The entire jungle held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Tom had stopped moving. At least, that was how it felt to everyone watching. The twin suns hung frozen in the sky. The wind forgot to blow. Even the smallest insects had gone perfectly still. David Webb stood 5 meters from the most dangerous predator in the known galaxy, and neither of them had moved for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. Inside David's mind, a battle was raging. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run, to flee, to get away from the killing machine in front of him. That was the old instinct, the one that kept his ancestors alive when they were weak and small. But there was another instinct, an older one, the one that said running was death, the one that said looking away was surrender, the one that had been forged in a million encounters with bears and wolves and big cats on a planet where humans had no claws, no fangs, no armor. He remembered his grandfather's voice from 20 years ago. A predator knows what prey looks like. Prey runs. Prey shows fear. Prey looks away. If you don't want to be prey, you can't act like prey. So David did not run. He did not look away. He controlled his breathing and forced his body to stay still, even though every cell wanted to flee. The Vorax studied this strange creature with growing confusion. Its ancient brain sorted through millions of years of hunting instincts. Prey ran. Prey screamed. Prey tried to hide or fight or surrender. Prey did not stand calmly and meet its gaze. The creature sniffed the air. The small being in front of it did not smell like prey. There was no fear scent pouring off its skin. There was something else, something the Vorax had never encountered before. A calm that came from understanding danger rather than ignoring it. Behind David, Prill watched with tears running down her fur. She wanted to scream at him to come back, to run, to save himself. But some deep part of her understood that the human was doing something important, something she could not comprehend, that Insi's body had cycled through every color her species could produce. She was recording everything, storing it in her memory cells. If she survived this, she would never forget what she was seeing. Professor Mulvaney had studied humans for decades. She had read about their history, their wars, their strange willingness to live alongside dangerous animals. She had thought it was foolishness, a sign of a primitive species that had not yet learned to fear properly. Now she understood. Humans had not failed to learn fear. They had learned something beyond fear. They had learned that running does not always save you, that submission does not always protect you, that sometimes the only way to survive is to stand your ground and refuse to be prey. The Vorax shifted its weight. Its claws dug into the soft ground. The mandibles opened and closed slowly, making a clicking sound like bones breaking. David did not flinch. The creature leaned forward, bringing its massive head closer. Its hot breath washed over David's face. A dozen alien eyes studied him from barely 2 meters away. This close, the human could see his own reflection in those dark surfaces. Still, David did not move. He kept his breathing steady. He kept his eyes locked on the creature's primary eye cluster. He thought about the grizzly bear he had faced in Alaska 3 years ago. He thought about the mountain lion that had stalked him in Montana. He thought about every moment he had survived by refusing to become prey. The Vorax made a strange sound. Not a roar, not a growl. Something between a question and a complaint. It pulled its head back. Its many eyes blinked in confusion. Then it took a step backward. Prill gasped. Insi pulsed bright gold. Professor Mulvaney dropped her communicator. The Vorax, the galaxy's perfect predator, the unkillable hunter, the nightmare of 100 worlds, had retreated from a single human who refused to run. David spoke without turning his head. His voice was quiet and steady. Professor, start moving the students toward the shuttle. Slowly. No sudden movements. No running. Do it now. For a moment, Mulvaney could not respond. Her mind was still trying to process what she had just witnessed. Then her training took over. Everyone, you heard him. Move slowly toward the shuttle. Help the wounded. Stay calm. The students began to move. Torgun had to be carried between two classmates. He was still whimpering, his earlier bravery completely shattered. David stayed where he was, standing between the retreating students and the confused predator. The Vorax watched the group move away, but did not follow. Its attention was still fixed on a human who had done the impossible, who had refused to be prey. The students moved through the jungle like ghosts. No one spoke. No one made unnecessary sounds. They carried their wounded classmates carefully, placing each foot with silent precision. Fear had taught them what years of education could not. Prill kept looking back over her shoulder. David had not moved from his position. He stood alone in the clearing, facing the monster, protecting their escape with nothing but his presence. Every instinct in her body told her to go back, to help him somehow, but she knew there was nothing she could do. This was a fight between predators, and she was not a predator. The Vorax was growing restless. Its hunting instinct screamed at it to attack, to tear apart this tiny creature that dared to challenge it. But something deeper, something wired into its brain from millions of years of evolution, held it back. This prey did not act like prey. It might be a trap. It might be something dangerous. The creature tested David with small movements. A step to the left, a twitch of its claws, a slight lowering of its head. Each time, it watched for signs of weakness, signs of prey behavior. Each time, David adjusted his position, but did not back down. David's muscles were burning from holding still. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His eyes ached from not blinking. But he had done this before, with bears in the Alaskan wilderness, with wolves in Yellowstone, with all the dangerous animals that shared Earth with humans. He knew how to wait. He knew how to be patient. He knew that breaking first meant dying. Almost there, Professor Mulvaney called quietly through the communicator. The shuttle is 200 meters ahead. David allowed himself a tiny breath of relief. They were going to make it. The students are going to survive. Then the Vorax lunged. It was a test, a fake attack meant to trigger the flight response. The creature's massive body shot forward 3 meters before stopping. Its mandibles snapped together with a sound like thunder. It was the most terrifying thing David had ever seen. That he did not run. Instead, he did something no creature had ever done in the Vorax's million-year history. He roared back. The sound that came from David's throat was not human. It was older than language, older than civilization, older than anything except survival itself. It was the sound of a species that had fought its way to the top of a death world, a species that had killed mammoths and saber-toothed cats and everything else that tried to eat them. The Vorax stopped mid-lunge. Its eyes blinked rapidly. Its mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or fear. 4-3 heartbeats, predator and predator faced each other across the blood-stained clearing. Then the Vorax turned, and our IT crashed through the jungle without looking back, snapping trees like twigs, disappearing into the shadows. In seconds, it was gone. The jungle slowly returned to life around David. Birds began singing. Insects started their songs again. The wind remembered how to blow. David stood perfectly still for another full minute, making sure it was not coming back. Then his legs stopped working. He dropped to his knees in the grass, shaking so hard he could barely breathe. The fear he had been holding back crashed over him like a wave. His hands trembled. His vision blurred. For a moment, he thought he might faint. Prill found him like that. She had run back as soon as she heard the silence, ignoring Professor Mulvaney's orders. She knelt beside David and put her small paws on his arm. "You're shaking," she said softly. "I thought you weren't afraid." David laughed weakly. It came out as more of a sob. "I was terrified, more afraid than I've ever been in my life. But you didn't run. You didn't even flinch. Running would have killed me, would have killed all of us." David slowly got control of his breathing. Predators are triggered by prey behavior. If you run, they chase. If you show fear, they attack. The only way to survive is to convince them you're not prey. Prill helped him to his feet. His legs were weak, but he could walk. They moved slowly through the jungle toward the shuttle. "I don't understand," Prill said. "How do you learn to do that? How do you learn to control fear so completely? David thought about the question as they walked. You don't control it, he said finally. You just make room for it. You accept that you're afraid, and then you do what needs to be done anyway. Humans have been doing that for a very long time. The shuttle came into view. The other students had gathered at the ramp, watching the jungle with terrified eyes. When they saw David emerge from the trees, supported by Prill, a strange sound went through the group. Part relief, part awe, part something else that none of them had words for. David climbed the ramp and collapsed against the wall. The shuttle door closed behind him. Only then, when the metal walls separated him from the jungle, did he finally close his eyes. They were safe. Everyone was alive. That was all that mattered. 3 days had passed since the encounter on Verdant 7. The research vessel Wandering Scholar drifted through space, its engines humming softly as it carried everyone towards safety. But something had changed among the passengers. Something that would never change back. David sat in the medical bay while a machine scanned his body for damage. The doctors had found elevated stress hormones, minor scratches he did not remember getting, and muscles strained from holding perfectly still for too long. Nothing serious. Nothing permanent. Professor Mulvaney entered the room quietly. She had been avoiding David since the incident, unable to find the right words. Now she forced herself to face him. The Vorax should not have been there, she said. It migrated north during a seasonal shift we didn't predict. Our surveys failed. I failed. She paused. You saved all of us. David shrugged. I did what anyone from Earth would do. No. Mulvaney shook her head slowly. That is not true. I have studied many species. When faced with an apex predator, every sentient being in the galaxy runs or freezes. Every single one. That is the natural response. That is what millions of years of evolution teaches. Umanza vulva differently. Yes, I am beginning to understand that. The professor sat down across from him. We call Earth a death world because of all the dangerous creatures living there. But we had it backwards, didn't we? Earth didn't make humans afraid. Earth made humans brave. David considered her words. We learned that running doesn't always save you. Sometimes the only way to survive is to stand your ground. Our ancestors figured that out a long time ago, and they passed it down to us. There was a knock at the door. Torgun stood in the entrance, his wounds bandaged, his eyes looking at the floor. The big student who had mocked David on the shuttle could not meet his gaze now. I wanted to apologize, Torgun said quietly, for what I said before. I called you weak. I thought you were soft. He finally looked up. I was wrong. When the Vorax found us in the caves, I ran. I screamed. I did everything prey does. You faced that thing and did not even blink. I was terrified, David said. Same as you. But you controlled it. How? My species is bigger than yours, stronger, with thicker skin and harder bones. But we evolved as herd animals. When danger comes, we run together. We cannot do what you did. David thought carefully before answering. Humans are not the strongest or fastest creatures on Earth. We have no claws, no fangs, no armor. But we learned that predators can be beaten, not always by fighting, but by refusing to be prey. When a bear charges at you, running triggers its chase instinct. Standing still makes it uncertain. Uncertainty gives you a chance. Torgun nodded slowly, trying to understand a way of thinking completely foreign to his species. Later that night, David found the students gathered on the observation deck. Prill was there, along with Ainsi and nearly everyone else from the field trip. They made room for him in the center of their circle. Tell us about Earth, Prill said. Tell us what it was really like growing up there. David told them about Montana, about tracking wolves through snow and watching bears fish in mountain streams, about learning to read the forest, to understand animals, to share the world with creatures that could kill him. He told them about his grandfather, who taught him that respect and courage were the same thing. Humans are not fearless, he said finally. We are afraid all the time, but we learned that being afraid doesn't mean you have to act afraid. Fear is just information. It tells you to pay attention, to be careful, to be ready. What you do with that information is your choice. Ainsi pulsed with soft colors. My people will tell stories about what happened on Verdant 7. For 1,000 years, They will talk about the human who made an Apex 7 retreat. I didn't do anything special, David said. I just did what I had to do. Prill shook her head. Her large ears were pointed straight at him, a sign of deep attention. That is what makes it special. You did not see yourself as doing something impossible. You just saw a problem and solved it the way humans have always solved problems, by refusing to give up. David looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere far away, on a jungle moon circling two suns, a Vorax was hunting in the darkness. Maybe it remembered the strange creature that had not run away. Maybe it still wondered what kind of predator could exist in such a small, soft body. Professor Mulvaney would add this encounter to her courses. Future students would study what happened on Verdant 7 and try to understand the species that had taught a monster to feel fear. They called Earth a death world. But the humans who came from that world had learned something the rest of the galaxy never had to learn. They had learned to look death in the eye and say, "Not today."